One of the biggest ways, if not the biggest way, to control the narrative and control the dialogue is to tap into this limitator frequency, this limitator effect that can exist in the collective mind and in the individual mind without even being noticed, without being detected. So with this video, I'm going to share how this effect gets into the minds of the individual and the masses and pushes the narrative, pushes the dialogue into the future, setting the foundation for these new programs and new systems that are designed to maintain the old system while bringing in new systems. So to put it pretty simply, the limitator effect is the ability to push a narrative, to push a dialogue onto the masses and onto the individual through representatives, through somebody that either pushes the ideas of those limitations or believes in the ideas within those limitations. These people do not have to be well versed in the information. They don't have to be well versed in the agenda. They just have to have some kind of influence and also have some kind of belief in the system. Others are very much versed in these limitation programs, and they cater to another group of people who are going to need that information to be a part of that narrative, to be a part of now imitating those limitators, imitating those imitators, and sharing that information from either the belief-driven perspective or the knowledge-based perspective of whatever that system is about. So you have people who believe in heliocentrism because it's a belief. Then you have people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye who sell the idea of science, the science of heliocentrism. But people who are aware of heliocentrism know it's still a belief sold with fake images and lies and all that other stuff. But you can see where I'm coming from in reference to somebody who is outside of the loop of the nuts and bolts, the inner workings of the system. You can see them as a group of believers, and then you have a group of engineers. So the top tier, upper echelon engineers are the ones that are more publicized to the masses to influence the collective mind. And the ones who are working more individually, you can see it compared to the difference between the mainstream media and YouTube, or newscasters and YouTubers. There's a new kind of limitator that's out there that is getting more and more into both worlds of the collective and the individual because social media is such a part of our reality now. A good example of this individual is someone like Elon Musk. Elon Musk is very influential in some of the biggest mind control programs that are out there. You have heliocentrism with SpaceX. You have the technology program with his electric vehicles and artificial intelligence. And you have the alien agenda with his belief systems, with him putting that tweet out there recently, I think it was within the last year, talking about the aliens built the pyramids, obviously. For him to state something like that, imagine what that does to the masses of people. Imagine what that does to the individual. Like I've said before, it just takes away the power of the people, the power of the ancestors, what we've done. One person, one tweet puts out there that your ancestors aren't shit because aliens did everything. And it becomes a collective belief. It becomes a collective science because of this man's influence. And systems like Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, these systems take those beliefs and install them from the collective mind into the individual mind. And the lubrication for that transition is the ego. Look at how many people have to defend heliocentrism, have to defend technology, have to defend Westernism. How they get really offended when you question heliocentrism because you're offending their ego. It's a part of who they are. It's the glue that holds together the straw man that these individuals have been building for their entire lives. People become technology. They become their beliefs. They become what people think they see these individuals are. They become the ego. And when you challenge that foundation, when you challenge that wholeness of what these individuals are, you're challenging the essence of their existence. Because they exist in their beliefs. They exist in their mind. They exist in this ego-based external version of reality. Because the example, the one that the masses imitate, the limitation program, the example out there, the mainstream media, the Western system, the system itself is externalized. It's about conquering. It's about ownership. It's about destruction. It's about what people see you as. It's about the cars. It's about the job. It's about all that nonsense. It's not about anything deeper than that. So people imitate that. And if the system is based upon limitation and limitators, then you're going to have a world of people who are going to not only imitate that system, but glorify and defend that system as they defend themselves, if not more. People defend these systems, these beliefs, the science, the NASA. They believe, they defend that nonsense more than they will defend their own belief systems. Because those beliefs, those limitations hold more weight in their reality than their own beliefs in who and what they are, than their own knowledge of who and what they are. So this system, this limitation system, this limitator-based system, in order to influence the masses, in order to control the masses, and have the masses control themselves, collectively and individually, they have to push the power dynamic. They have to believe. They have to be fearful, scared of the government, scared of these systems, scared of it failing. This was that whole too big to fail nonsense that's out there. And convincing you that they have to push tax money or money into the government, into the military, into all of these things. Oh, we have to build up our defenses, and we have to put money into technology. We have to put money into the banks, but they don't put anything into you. Nothing is put into righting the wrongs of this system, because the system does no wrong. And if the system doesn't have to own up to its wrongdoings, like going into this critical race shit, they don't even want you to know what the system has done. They want you to think like, oh, nothing was done at all. So if the system, the example maker, if that system isn't even acknowledging any wrongdoing, then the individual is 10 orders of magnitude separated from having to own up to anything that they've done, from having to acknowledge any wrongdoings of the system or themselves. If the people who write these books aren't going to acknowledge it, the people who read the books have zero requirements of acknowledging or even knowing about anything. Look at how adamant this system is in ignoring racism. It doesn't want to go to the depths. This is another part when people ask, why do you always talk about racism? There's a concerted effort by the biggest mind control program system out there, the mainstream media, your education system, the superpower of the world. It is hell-bent on dismissing and ignoring its wrongdoings. And obviously, for people who are aware, this is not coming from a woe is me victimized perspective. This is coming from acknowledging a mind control system. But for people who defend that system, they will jump into their emotions and project onto you that, oh, well, everybody's a victim. Racism is just this. And they will try to turn you into a victim, even though you're not coming from that space. They will turn you into a victim in order to downplay the system, to downplay where you're coming from, project on you to belittle you. But that's not where we're coming from. You're talking about race. We're talking about mind control. And for people who are limited by their ego, by their emotions, they can only hear or see where you're coming from that perspective. And if you're not coming from that perspective, they will make what you're saying based upon that perspective. This is why there's so much pushback from the masses of people, because the majority of people haven't done that work. Because that individual work is the hardest work to do. You can't look at yourself. If the system can't look at itself for its wrongdoing against the indigenous people, not only in the United States, but around the world. If the system is adamantly avoiding those programs, like I said, the individual is going to be no less than 10 orders of magnitude separated from acknowledging that system themselves, individually and collectively. So they will be the loudest ones in going against you. The individuals will be the most adamant in keeping you from talking about that information, because what they are imitating, that system that they are imitating, puts out that vibe. And then all the influencers that represent that system maintain that vibe. So your actors, your athletes, your professors, your teachers, your spiritual teachers, your gurus, all these people. This is what I said in reference to the New Age, and even your truthers who avoid these kinds of information. These truthers, self-proclaimed truthers, who avoid the truth of racism in this system. How could you call yourself a truther and downplay the effect of racism on the world and the individual? So that just goes to show you that the power doesn't exist in the truth. It exists in their focus. They focus only on one thing. It's not truth. The focus is on subjects, just like the mainstream media. So the power in the truther community is in the name. They want to be called a truther because they don't want to be called a conspiracy theorist. And they used to be part of the mainstream media. This is the evolution of information, this artificial version of awakening, enlightenment. It used to be completely lost. Then you went into conspiracy theories. Now you're going into truth. Now you're part of a truther theory community. Is that the end? No, it's not the end, because the real path, the real journey of truth leads you back to yourself. It leads you back to the center, simplicity, letting go of all that nonsense. People who can't come back to that center, they can't be on their own. Those are the ones who need to be a part of some kind of community. They need to lean on something else. They need a crutch. These communities, these truther communities, conspiracy communities, mainstream communities, progressive communities, these are crutches. There's something that they lean upon. Truth isn't something that you need to lean upon. If you need to lean upon it, then you need to go further. This truther community, these truther-based communities, these are the last communities. These are the last communities that you need, because it is a process. You need the community to get out of that completely mind-controlled, broken down system. You need to get out of that, and you need assistance. You need help. And with all these communities, think of it like I was saying in the beginning of this video, the limitators, the imitators. When you go into the military, you imitate to become that community, and you accumulate the limitations of that community. So you imitate and you limitate. You imitate the community and you limitate yourself. So I limitated myself in the military, got into the limitations of the Zeitgeist community, got into the limitations of the Occupy community, got into the limitations of the New Age community, got into the limitations of the Truther community. And now breaking free of all these community-based systems leaves you with yourself. And when you're left with yourself, you're not limited by any of these systems. You're not blaming, you're not victimizing. You just have a general awareness of what's going on. It's easier to see like I said in previous videos, the biggest wounds that are out there that people are dealing with. You can see what people are dealing with and what people are avoiding, because it's obvious. And this is why I focus a lot of my information on not so much racism, but the systems surrounding racism, because racism itself goes into the individual and the collective. It's still very much a live mind control. People are running away from it too. There are benefits and of course there are limitations. But when you talk about it, people who haven't done the work and don't see the benefit of going into it, they only see the limitations because they can't empathize with the benefits. That's where the disconnect comes from. So-called white people have a very serious problem with you talking about racism because it's very difficult for them to see the benefits of something, especially if the system is using that something to add further separation, to add further chaos. Obviously, the mainstream media, the movies, all these politicians, they're using racism to create further division, further control. But that's different than an individual going through this process to heal themselves. Their genetics, their generations of people haven't been through these problems. They haven't been through these systems for hundreds of years. So they don't see the benefit there. They only can see the negative side effects, the negative usage. So when they can only see that, they can only see you being negative. That's why it doesn't matter what these people say or how they perceive where you're coming from. This information isn't for them. This is for the people who are still having a difficult time breaking out of that, because a lot of people who would be able to benefit from this information still think like those people. They still think like it's just a negative thing. This is the main community of people that I'm speaking to. The ones that were like me, they break free of that only negative base. Because I used to be like that too. I was like, what is the benefit of talking about racism if I'm an infinite universal being? What's the benefit of racism if I am God? If I am like all this shit that is beyond this reality, but what has racism got to do with anything? You won't know until you go there. There are negative parts of the story. There are limitations of that story, and there are benefits. There are things that are going to push you forward and bring people together and heal parts of you that you didn't even know existed. Look at the brown eye, blue eye experiment and how deep that shit goes into children. Look at the doll experiment. Look at how deep that goes into children. How deep are those programs existing in adults if they existed that deep inside children? How deep into the subconscious do we have to go? See, a lot of people in these truther communities are based upon the surface layer, the conscious stuff. But when you're going into racism, when you're going into these mind controls, the biggest part of these mind controls exists in your unconscious mind, in your subconscious reality, in your knee-jerk reflexes. And you can't address the subconscious and the unconscious reality from a conscious limitation, from a conscious perspective. It's not going to work. And people who are largely based upon their ego, based upon their emotions, they're going to be limited by the conscious framework. And when they have those limitations, they have to defend it because that is their foundation. That is who they are. So they're defending the ego. They're defending their emotions because it's safe to be there, because they are very much aware. They're well versed in that surface layer. And if you go any deeper, it's dangerous for them. They're scared of that. So in order to avoid looking vulnerable, in order to avoid going deeper, they have to project onto you as if you're wrong. So-called white people have a problem with you talking about racism because in many ways they feel vulnerable because you're leaving them. You have something, you're going to heal yourself on a deeper layer than they can go. They can go there, but it's easier for you to go there because you can see it. You can see what's wrong. You can see what happened to us because it's still happening. So it's easier for you to go and heal those wounds because you know what's there. A lot of the stuff that so-called white people are dealing with is very internal. It's hidden because just like in the mainstream media and in the education system, it's not meant to be seen. It's hidden under the surface. Their systems, their people are seen as if they have done nothing wrong. They are the perfect beings. They're in the image of God. The Jesus program. They're the highest intellect, highest technology, highest morality, highest beauty standards. Everything that they have is the best. They put themselves out there as that. They see nothing wrong with them. In that situation, those people are going to have the most difficult time realizing that something needs to change, that something needs to evolve. Why change something that's been working for so long? Why change something that doesn't seem to be wrong? So when you are changing, when you are coming to these deeper parts of yourself, you are a threat to that superpower, individually and collectively. Your healing is going to project you into a higher space of being. And that's a threat. They're going to lose power because they're going to lose power over you. This is why they have such an issue with racism. Once you break those mind controls, you become more powerful individually and collectively. And if you become more powerful, they become less powerful. And like I said, this doesn't mean that a lot of these people are doing this consciously. They are trained through this limitation program, through this limitator program, to be unaware of this system, to be unaware of these programs. These knee-jerk responses are supposed to be acting and interacting in the world subconsciously and unconsciously. If they are solely based on the conscious awareness on the surface layer, this is the benefit to the unknown, the total greatness without acknowledging any wrongdoing, is that you will have people acting based upon their subconscious and unconscious responses on people. They'll be reacting onto people and not know why, and defend it without even knowing why, without caring. And they don't need to, because their word, their belief will be held to a higher standard than yours because, like I said before, they can do no wrong because they have done no wrong. So the biggest systems that are out there that maintain that program are this Western New World perspective, this colonial mindset, the mainstream media, the mainstream narrative, your education system. These are all the frameworks, the foundation for the people, not only so-called white people, like I said, the people largely that I'm speaking to with these videos are the ones who need that extra push towards realizing that something more is there internally that needs to be adjusted, that needs to be dealt with, and has nothing to do, I was going to say largely has nothing to do, but completely has nothing to do with the external. I've only come back to speak about this external information because it sets you on a journey, sets you on a realization back into the internal. The purpose of speaking about racism and the depths of this is not to keep it on the surface layer. It's to set off people onto that path back to their center, back to the internal. Obviously, racism itself is an externalized, shallow, mind control, fucked up system. Do I share this information to keep people there? No, of course not. People who want to stay there because it's comfortable are going to stay there. People who want to think that you're staying there and keep you there, they're going to stay there because it's comfortable. It's comfortable for somebody to look down upon you because you're talking about racism, so they will see you through their own eyes of the surface layer. But no, we're not coming at it from that perspective. You see it from that perspective. We are coming at the surface layer conscious reality of this racism agenda to get people into the internal systems that far surpass racism and any of that surface layer bullshit. This is why I talk about this information. So in closing, I'll just name off a few of these programs, these groups of people, communities that are out there, and give some examples of how they act just as the individual acts when they project these belief systems onto you and onto themselves. Because like I said, you have the collective ego and you have the individual, both of which are defended. And largely, a lot of the times, the collective ego is defended by the individual more than the individual defends themselves. Because the collective ego is more of the individual than the individual is of themselves. This is how powerful this system is. This is why it's a benefit to have these communities out there. Because communities maintain weak people. Look at all these people in these truther communities debating flat versus globe. You're not dealing with extremely internally powerful people who continue to stay in that kind of community because they get their power from being smarter and more savvy in the debating. They get their power from somebody else, from some kind of interaction. It doesn't come from them. It comes from the interaction with somebody else. This is at the heart of racism. So-called white people get their power from demonizing and beating down the indigenous people of the world. The white gets the power from the downplaying of the black. This is why the whiteness and the blackness was created. These illusions. And still to this day, and this is why people are living in that illusory power. Still to this day, people call themselves white. They call themselves black. And then project onto channels like mine talking about, why are you still talking about race? You're low energy. Oh my God, you know how many orders of magnitude you are from actually being on to the crosshairs of moving forward? Get the fuck out of here. Like I said, these topics are not limited by the topics. They're not limited by the topic where they're coming from something else. These are triggers to get people to get back to themselves, to the center, to get out of these communities. So these communities are glorified with the internet, with social media. The mainstream media was just one of the first collective communities out there for a purpose to control. Racism, like that deep, dark colonial racism, that community predated the mainstream community. People unified around the savage indigenous people, and they rallied around the new world on the blood and the bones of the savage, less evolved indigenous peoples of the world. That was the first community of belief. And then once they conquered and destroyed and genocided everybody but that belief system was based upon, now they had to create another community. And that community was this whole industrial age, technology-based future of humanity, mainstream community. This is where we are today, largely. And now that mainstream thought frame is being seen for what it is and crashing and burning, now they had to install all these other communities. The benefit of installing that community on top of the other community is what? Nobody even talks about the other community anymore. They don't talk about the racism community that was built underneath the mainstream community. That's not even, why are you talking about racism? Oh God, here we go. If you're talking about the mainstream media, this is why when I talk about Russell Brand and all that shit, as deep as he goes into the mainstream media, that community, what was that community based on? What was the community that predated that community? Racism. They have zero words to say about this. And if they do, they're extremely shallow, very basic. So these smaller communities are built on top of the larger community. You have the racist community of so-called whiteness over blackness, old school, setting up the new world. Before you have the new world order, you had to have the new world. Why are we not talking about the new world if you're talking about the new world order? Why? Because that's dealing with more personal shit. It's getting more internal, and people don't want to go there. So, like I said, the easier thing to do is to what? Stay within these communities. Defend your community, because there is no need to do any personal work if you're in a community. Because as long as you just keep your head down in the community, you're seen, and the community seems to evolve, you're seen as an evolved creature because the community is evolving. So you had the racism community, you had the mainstream community, now you have these social media communities. And these social media communities have little communities within them. You have your truther community, you have your ego-based individual communities. Within these, you have these comedians like Joe Rogan, has his little community. He's dealing with the limitations of westernization and the limitations of Western intellect and technology, and he pushes all those agendas. He's paid millions of dollars, like I said, those athletes and actors, they're paid millions of dollars. They're paid millions of dollars to keep their mouths shut, to only go so far, to not expose the system that they're a part of and themselves. They're paid so much to put people he's put out there to put other micro communities. He's a micro community of a micro community. But when he puts these other teachers and communities on his podcast, he's expanding and putting more exposure on these communities that are going to keep people going deeper and deeper and deeper into the external versions of themselves, this synthetic artificial reality. And then you have little shit stains that are just carbon copies, imitators, limitators, based upon people like Joe Rogan. So you have the flagrant 2 little kids that are on there, these man children who are just copycatting Joe Rogan. And they talk about these subjects, they talk about it with their friends. They're surrounded by all these Western toys and gadgets on their little set, and they're supposed to seem likable and relatable to their community. And their perspectives are seen as better or more personal than the mainstream media. And this is the benefit of having the mainstream media, because the mainstream media plays that Donald Trump of reality. It's so fake, it's so artificial, that anything that's just not like it is going to be real, is going to be believable. So if they sell you a Donald Trump, it's easy to sell you a Joe Biden. It's easy to sell you a Barack Obama. I mean, George Bush was the same way for Barack Obama. They have to sell you, completely lowball you on something in order to sell you something else. So the mainstream media spawns this garbage ass middleman like Joe Rogan, and these shit stains of Joe Rogan like the flagrant 2 comedians. And then when they share their perspectives, they're sharing their beliefs and their love and their limitations. When they talk about how, cars and technology and space and all this shit, it's just you're sucking it up, because now you're reaffirming yourself in your own limitations by imitating them. And you might not see it as imitating them, but just assuming their perspectives as if it's a mirror image of yours is becoming a part of that system. This is why you have those programs out there. And then you have obviously the TYT and the progressives, and then you have aggressive progressives, the offshoots of the mainstream, to make it seem more real. And you couldn't have the progressives if you didn't have the regressives. You couldn't have TYT if you didn't have the mainstream media. They play off of each other. And what that does is it creates this other foundation. If you don't want to be a part of that, then you want to be a part of, it's all about just putting up this illusion of evolving intelligence. And I just saw a Breaking Points. This is another progressive network that's out there with these, you have a white woman and an Indian man who are talking about, it's supposed to be, they're progressive. They're it's no longer just white people talking about it. They have an Indian man out there and a woman. Oh my God, let's listen to these people. And they put themselves out there as the new mainstream. They literally call it that. They want you to help them build a new mainstream. And this is what I'm saying. This is the idea of mainstream is the problem, because they're thinking for you. And when you bring up something to them and they downplay it, how many hundreds of thousands and potentially millions of people are they affecting with their own limitations? A mainstream is a limitation. And they're so fucking full of themselves, they can't even see that. They're not even aware of that. So they will assume the same limitations as a program they seem to be putting themselves as different from. And they've literally called themselves the new mainstream, and they want your help to help them build another mainstream. So they're basically just a sibling to the TYTs out there, the progressives, aggressive progressives. Like I said, all this is about limitation anyway. So you have those people who are talking to certain demographic of people. You have the flagrant twos talking to a certain demographic of people. They're talking TYTs and breaking points, progressives. That group is talking to a group of people. The difference between a TYT and a breaking points is the same difference between like the flagrant twos and the Joe Rogan. They're exactly the same, but they're talking to the same group, the same demographic of people. It's like the difference between CNN and MSNBC. Different networks, same programming. They're going to attract the same group of people to push the same type of narrative. Then you have individuals out there who are themselves a network. Elon Musk is a network. He puts out the programming of space, technology, artificial intelligence, aliens, the future of Western society, all this stuff. He's a superhero in the minds of these illusory programs. And whatever he says, whatever he believes is going to be easily, because he's an individual, it's easier. It's easier to accept these belief systems from an individual than a community. This is why he's promoted so much, and this is why he's being a part of this whole Twitter thing, because they're basically installing his beliefs, installing his program into the minds of the masses the same way Donald Trump did with Twitter. What they're doing with the relationship with Elon Musk is what Donald Trump did on his own with Twitter, because Twitter is a direct link to your brain. It's a direct link to your mind. Like I said before, when Elon Musk says the pyramids were obviously built by aliens, what are all the side set beliefs that come along with that? And how many millions of people who are on the fence about any of that stuff, because the education system leaves you on the fence and the entertainment industry leaves you on the fence with all that? How many of those people are going to automatically push you over the fence and push you into the alien backyard now? Now you're just about aliens, and you're even further more about fucking over the ancestors who are part of this higher intelligence in many different ways. But anyway, so like I said, like these other communities out there, Elon Musk is like an individual community, and he will affect larger communities. He sets the tone on how you should interact and believe in larger communities. And there's a lot of people, other people like Elon Musk. You have Neil deGrasse Tyson, Michio Kaku, Bill Nye. They're all a part of communities, but their beliefs themselves, they're representatives of their own kind of community. People circle around them like a community. People, look at how many people reference Neil deGrasse Tyson and Elon Musk. How many people reference what they say? That creates a community. Joe Rogan the same way, but he's more of like a referencing other people type kind of community. Eckhart Tolle's another one. Sadhguru, these are all these people who are individuals who represent an entire mindset, and whatever they say holds this powerful weight in the minds of the people. Russell Brand's another one. These are all communities built around these individuals, and they will hold up other communities. The QAnons that are out there, what happens within these communities, like I said, they get this information, it creates these limitations, and then they imitate the people around them that are a part of that community, the representatives of that community. So these limitator systems create limitator people. So yeah, you got your Russell Brands, your Eckhart Tolle's, your Joe Rogans, your QAnons, and you have your ego-based truthers. Like I said, the downfall to any kind of community is that it maintains weak people. If you had a community built up of people who are themselves their own community, that's a powerful community, because they don't need the community. Their power is not based in the community. The power is based in themselves. And if you had a group of people coming together based on that, that's a different story. And that's what these shallow communities, these subject-based communities don't want. They want you to stay talking about flat earth, talking about the mainstream media, talking about mud floods, talking about aliens, talking about the QAnon strategically released shit, talking about what Joe Rogan talks about. They want you talking about that because it creates this limited base community. And as long as you're stuck in that shit, you're never going to empower yourself because there's no reason to. You have the illusion of power in that artificial community. And at the base of all these programs and at the base of the intention behind all of these communities is that with these communities, it creates this illusion of coming together, but it's actually more divide and conquer. It's a more complex version of divide and conquer. And you will see people attack me when I talk about racism because they think I'm talking about creating a community. I'm not. They think I'm talking from the perspective of a community. I'm not. This information is being shared to emphasize the evolution out of that community back into yourself, whatever community it is. And once you're empowered in yourself without needing those communities, that's when you can actually start moving forward. Until then, if you're moving based upon these communities, you're easily manipulated. You're easily controlled. And if your power exists in those communities, then you're part of a bigger mind control program. So if you find yourself a part of these communities, take a moment to think, because you're going to need to break out of those communities in order to break into yourself.